I gotta say, I love Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic. I have played that game to no end, and even recently I almost finished a playthrough. I say almost because there is only a last mission to complete, but you get the point. And the reason I'm mentioning Knights of the Old Republic is that we have some news in regards to the remake. It seems that the remake reveal is gonna happen very soon after 3 years of Saber rebuilding it from scratch. And if this report is accurate, I think it's one of the more encouraging updates we've had on the Knights of the Old Republic remake, but I would still keep expectation in check until we see actual gameplay. I would say that the good news isn't that the rumored reveal is about to happen relatively soon. It's that the Saber reportedly started over from scratch and has spent 3 years rebuilding the project. If you remember, after the original version of Aspire reportedly failed to meet expectations, starting over was probably the right call rather than trying to salvage a project with fundamental problems. Also, I should say 3 years is enough time to establish the game's vision, build core systems, and reach a point where a reveal is realistic. Team Willits also publicly confirmed earlier this year that development is continuing, which sort of gives this rumor a bit more credibility. It doesn't confirm any of the insiders' claims, but at least we know the project is still alive. And since the Aspire people are no longer in the picture, I would say this is probably the biggest reason I am cautiously optimistic. Saber isn't perfect, but they have experience handling large-scale projects. And unlike Aspire, or whatever the hell you pronounce that name, whose reputation was primarily based on ports and remasters, Saber has much more experience building full AAA games. So if they're pooling talent from across the company, as the rumor suggests, that's exactly what you want for a project as important as Knights of the Old Republic. There were also some rumors about combat, and that's basically the part I'm most skeptical about. If you remember, or if you know, the original Knights of the Old Republic wasn't an action RPG. It's basically a Dungeons and Dragons game using real-time with boss combat. So if people want something more action-orientated, like, I don't know, Star Wars Jedi-style lightsaber combat, Final Fantasy XVII Remake's tactical pause, and RPG progression, I don't know, for some of you that actually might sound like a reasonable compromise. I, however, do not think that, because to me, the main challenge is always preserving what made Knights of the Old Republic special. Because if the combat becomes pure action with a skill tree, you risk losing a lot of tactical depth and party management that defined the original. And I could argue that combat is really important, but then you might say people most remember Knights of the Old Republic because of its companions, dialogue, player choice, morality system, and one of gaming's most famous plot twists. However, for me, combat is also very important. But still, if Saber nails the atmosphere, the characters, and the role-playing while modernizing the mechanics, they might have a hit. And if they focus too much on cinematic action and simplifying the RPG systems, I don't think that's going to be a game for me. Now, should we expect a 2026 reveal? Maybe, and I would say Game Awards reveal actually feels plausible. 3 years into a rebooted development cycle is usually when studios start showing gameplay, unless you're Bethesda, especially if they're targeting a release a year or two later. That said, the industry has taught us one thing over the past 5 years. Don't trust release windows until publishers announce them themselves. Even if the game is progressing well today, delays happen for reasons that have nothing to do with development quality. In the end, my biggest concern is that Lucasfilm and Embracer don't try to make Knights of the Old Republic into Star Wars Souls. Not every Star Wars game needs to be a copy of Jedi Fallen Order or Survivor. This one should still feel like an RPG first. If the remake preserves deep dialogue choices, meaningful party members, character builds, exploration, player agency, proper lightsaber combat, stuff like that, while modernizing all other aspects, it could become one of the best Star Wars games recently released. However, if it sacrifices those elements just to chase broader appeal, it risks becoming another competent action game instead of the Knights of the Republic we fans have been waiting for. So overall, this rumor sort of moves me from skeptical to cautiously optimistic. The project surviving, being rebuilt by a more experienced developer and reportedly nearing a reveal are all positive signs, but until I see gameplay running in real time, I wouldn't assume the remake has turned the corner. And that's basically my take on this news. Thanks very much for watching, and as always, like, share, subscribe, comment, all that good stuff. And that's it from me, until the next one.